Jessica Alves made her first appearance on the show way back in 2014 and talked about her plans to become a human Ken doll.
Yes, but after dozens of cosmetic surgeries, she then announced a new ambition was to become a human Barbie.
After undergoing the knife again last month, Jessica will be showing off her latest look next. But first, let's go back to her transformation from human Ken doll to human Barbie.
I've been working on myself. I really try my best to change, but sometimes even love.
Afternoon, dolls. So, growing up, I didn't really consume a lot of media, but the artistic masterpieces that were the Barbie films were a notable exception.
Yes, I am a girl like you.
I didn't have TV, I didn't have most films, radio, or mainstream books, but I had Barbie. Recently, my sister and I decided it would be fun to have a nostalgia trip and rewatch the films together since she lives in California and we don't get to see each other very often. And I have to say, while watching Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper the other day, I was really taken with the subliminal political messaging and the fact that there's literally like a trans dog cat in the film.
What's wrong, Wolfie? Are you sick? Something in your throat? Wait a minute. Are you trying to meow?
Like, I don't know how the cat actually identifies, and I don't want to start a trans species discourse, but I mean, come on. Whilst simultaneously representing conventional beauty standards and heteronormative ideas, Barbie has somehow also managed to become a safe space for explorations of identity and queerness for many folks. Through the medium of the doll, we can deconstruct and reconstruct identity and expression on a whim. Through the medium of the doll, we see that the doll can become anything. And maybe, just maybe, that means that we can become anything too. I can see you when you're feeling low, you can't hide that from me. You're no status quo, calico, so why keep trying to be? 'Cause you're more than that. You're my doggish cat. I wish you could see the you I see. I say, if you bark, celebrate it, make your mark, serenade it. Those arc, should've had a cat like you. And if what you are is a strange you, doesn't mean you should change you, only means you should change your point of view. Hey feline, you fetch just fine, to thine own self be true. Your bow wows, the cat's meow, it's how I know you're you. You don't need the bows or tiara, but your woes, sayonara. Trust your nose, 'cause it knows the way to go. When you chase your tail, you're enchanting, spirit sail when you're panting. When you wail, you're over Romeo. There is not one hair of you that I would rearrange. I love you the way you are, and that will never change. That will never change. I have a friend who keeps saying that I'm going to come out as a cat girl next, and I'm really not beating the allegations.
She's a diamond in the rough.
You may already know this, but the word doll is a slang term for a trans woman. From what I could find, usage of the word doll to refer to people and not just toys originates in an 1800s short story called The Grey Woman. Eventually, it would be commonly used to refer to a beautiful woman, later more specifically to a beautiful yet not very smart woman. And in the ballroom scene of the 80s, it would be used amongst trans women of color to refer to women of trans experience. Some people find this usage offensive. Not only does the word have history in implying brainless femininity, but its origin implies fakeness. Dolls are little plastic things we project gender expression onto, imitations of real-life gendered bodies. Those who are transphobic might think that the term doll is perfectly descriptive because they view trans women as fake too. When people think of trans women, they often think of women who have had a great deal of plastic surgery done and who perform hyperfemininity in a manner similar to that of Barbie. Even in researching this term, I found someone on Twitter, rest in peace, saying, "A doll is a trans woman because they get so much work done. The plastic, that's why they're called dolls. They're always dressed up." Now this tweet makes sense in so much that you can understand how that term came to refer to trans women. However, it also highlights the ways in which this is all just a bit offensive and wrong. All trans women do not... I was putting the remote controller I use for my teleprompter in between my crotch to like hold it in between my legs so I don't have to keep going and grabbing the remote every time I need to like pause, and it fell out of my crotch. Just thought you needed to know that. Hashtag behind the scenes. I was really inspired by the recent usage of controllers by a certain group of billionaires. And so, you know, it works great for teleprompters too. Who knew? Wow. So cool. All trans women are not always dressed up. But in the media's carefully constructed image of trans women, that could be hard to see. In Julia Serrano's book entitled Whipping Girl, she has an entire chapter called Skirt Chasers, Why the Media Depicts the Trans Revolution in Lipstick and Heels. In it, she states, "In virtually all depictions of trans women, whether real or fictional, deceptive or pathetic, the underlying assumption is that the trans woman wants to achieve a stereotypically feminine appearance and gender role. The possibility that trans women are even capable of making a distinction between identifying as female and wanting to cultivate a hyper-feminine image is never raised. In fact, the media often dwells on the specifics of the feminization process, showing trans women putting on their feminine exteriors. It's telling that TV, film, and news producers tend not to be satisfied with merely showing trans women wearing feminine clothes and makeup. Rather, it is their intent to capture trans women in the act of putting on lipstick, dresses, and high heels, thereby giving the audience the impression that trans woman's femaleness is an artificial mask or costume." Editor's note here, but I was reading ahead in Whipping Girl, which admittedly I have not finished yet at the time of this video going live. But she has another chapter quite a lot further in the book where she also mentions that trans women are often forced to perform hyperfemininity as a requirement by gatekeepers who don't believe that we're trans enough. In other words, to prove to medical gatekeepers that we should be allowed to access the tools of transition, specifically medical transition and surgery, we have to perform hyperfemininity or they won't believe that we're trans enough. And I just felt like that needed to be included in here. Julia goes on to describe her own experience with her gender and sex as having more to do with an innate understanding that her sex is female, something she refers to as her subconscious sex. And the subconscious sex is totally disconnected from any desire to perform femininity. In fact, she reveals that she has little desire to be stereotypically feminine at all, and yet she still identifies and passes as a woman. I relate to this to some degree. While I did have a lot of stereotypical encounters with femininity growing up, such as playing with dolls, like Barbie, and dressing up, one of the things that made it hardest for me to come out as trans was a disconnect I felt with heteronormative displays of femininity, which I couldn't connect with. I wasn't aware of Julia's concept of a subconscious sex growing up, but there were definitely moments where I felt my subconscious sex trying to communicate with me. And what emerged from those communications was a fundamental connection with something feminine. But the ways in which I wanted to manifest that femininity, both within my physical sex and my gender expression, didn't really match up with the portrayals of traditional womanhood I had seen growing up. When I entered the queer space as an adult gay man and met other trans women for the first time, those trans women were closer to the stereotypical doll trope. And at the time, I was convinced that wasn't me, because I didn't want to look anything like Barbie. So I couldn't be trans, right? Wrong! Julia is right to say that being trans doesn't necessarily mean you want to be conventionally feminine. I know trans women who identify themselves as butch and masculine. Obviously, trans experiences are incredibly complex. Not everyone knew they were a girl since they were 6. We didn't all try on our mother's high heels when we were kids. But I think Julia spends just a little bit too long focusing on the ways in which, as a woman, she herself is not stereotypically feminine. And so transphobes in the media are wrong about hyperfemininity and trans experience. Like, yes, it's important to highlight exceptional occurrences of trans experience, especially if it debunks transphobic positions. But what are we debunking for? Who cares if transphobes think we're all hyperfeminine plastic mockeries of womanhood? Who cares if they think we're all a bunch of fake Barbie dolls? The thing is, right, sometimes it's okay for the dolls to doll. Whether or not you can relate to hyperfemininity doesn't mean hyperfeminine expression in others is bad. Even if hyperfemininity did exclusively originate as a male invention to control women, that doesn't mean that if you like to wear high heels and makeup, you're anti-feminist. If you find feminine expression annoying or superfluous or unattractive, none of those are reasons to be anti-doll. Dolling is not a crime. It's a beautiful and wonderful thing that is individual to each and every person's unique experience. And just to clarify, I don't think Julia's anti-doll either. In fact, I couldn't recommend her book Whipping Girl enough to my fellow trans femmes. It's a fantastic read. I just don't want us to feel the need to justify hyperfeminine expression to an incredibly sexist world. One thing I've realized in my own journey is that I love to doll. I think the reason I didn't connect with hyperfemininity as much, both before and early on in my transition, was because I was deeply ashamed of my femininity. I grew up in a household of women who were, growing up, a bit judgmental of hyperfeminine expression, and especially of plastic surgery and attempts to change one's appearance, whether through makeup or hair dye or whatever else. My first boyfriend hated me doing drag and told me he was gay because he was into men. So my whole life I've been inundated both from those close to me and a wider culture that feminine bad, and not just for me specifically as an AMAB person, although obviously that too. Another part of my doll disconnect was that I'm significantly more drawn to expressions of femininity that are less conventional and less heteronormative, but I wasn't even presented with those as an option growing up. I was so isolated from popular culture that I didn't even know a feminine world existed outside Christian horse girls. But I fucking love being feminine. I love dressing up and putting on makeup and being camp. It doesn't mean I'm like that all the time because I'm a complex, multifaceted person. It doesn't mean I think womanhood is all about shopping and putting on a dress. But likewise, I won't be shamed for liking those things either. And that shame is coming at us dolls on blast, both externally and from within our own community all the time. The other day, I was at Trans Pride and a trans woman came up to me and basically started mocking me for passing and looking fish. She then saw my nails and was like, "Oh, I see you're in your hyper-feminine phase now," as if I'd grow out of it later on in my transition. And whilst this interaction was just incredibly shitty and incredibly patronizing and not what I wanted at Trans fucking Pride, it spoke to me that the trans woman in question was shaming me for my gender expression. She saw my femininity as just a phase in my exploration of gender, as something I'd eventually grow out of like I assume she had. Like she views my current embrace of hyperfemininity as a desperate ploy to get closer to successful womanhood as a trans woman, as opposed to the possibility that, you know, I just really like acrylic nails. And I do! They're so much fun! Shame is a powerful force in the human experience. It makes us hate things in ourselves, it makes us hate things in others. But no matter our inner feelings and struggles, we need to let the dolls doll in peace. And who knows, maybe you could enjoy a little dolling yourself every once in a while.
And I curse in the name of the Lord this new Barbie movie that has been released full of transsexual and transgender and homosexuality. In the name of the Lord, make God loose a holy judgment.
She's a diamond in the rough.
In the world of dolls, there are few more iconic than Barbie. Trans actress Harry Neff, when offered the role to play one of the Barbies in the new Barbie movie, wrote on Instagram that identity politics and cinema aren't my favorite combination, but the name Barbie looms large over every American woman. Barbie's the standard. She's the girl. She's certainly the doll. Me and my girlfriends, me and my other transgender girlfriends, we started calling ourselves the dolls a couple of years ago, though the phrase stretches back into the language of our foremothers in the ballroom scene. The dolls. Maybe it's a bid to ratify our femininity, to smile and sneer at the standards we're held to as women. It's a joke, of course. We throw our voices, the dolls. But underneath the word doll is the shape of a woman who is not quite a woman. Recognizable as such, but still a fake. Doll is fraught, glamorous. She is and isn't. We call ourselves the dolls in the face of everything we know we are, never will be, hope to be. We yell the word because the word matters, and no doll matters more than Barbie. I love the way Harry pens this. It's a poetic love letter to the word, which, despite its controversies, can mean so much to trans women. For me, it's a term of community. The dolls are plural. We are each of us the dolls together, and there's warmth and solidarity in that. Harry being cast in the Barbie film, whilst incredibly appropriate given the history of the word doll, held no few controversies. The usual suspects wrote about her casting pushing, insert transphobic drivel here.
I have two daughters. I have a 7-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they've been talking about going to see Barbie for weeks now. They've seen the posters. They saw a trailer before the Spider-Man movie, and I didn't even know it wasn't like PG, but apparently it's PG-13. It's full of suggestive humor. And I found out last week, they somehow didn't let anyone know this with the marketing campaign, that one of Barbie's main 3 sidekicks is, surprise, surprise, a man. I mean, is nothing sacred?
But they affirmed that Barbie already has a history of promoting the trans. One particularly hilarious, over-the-top anti-trans article wrote, "Mattel, the company that makes Barbie, has been at the forefront of pushing transgenderism." They attributed this to the Laverne Cox Barbie doll, which dropped last year. And I'll definitely go ahead and say that there's something really powerful about having a trans Barbie, and also about honoring Laverne Cox specifically, who is just an incredible trans trailblazer. Laverne stated when the Barbie was announced that, "What excites me most about her being out in the world is that trans young people can see her and maybe get to purchase her and play with her and know that there's a Barbie made by Mattel for the first time in the likeness of a trans person." In this environment where trans kids are being attacked, this can also be a celebration of transness and also a space for them to dream, understand, and be reminded that trans is beautiful. And that is really, really beautiful. But we also know that when corporations choose to represent minorities, they're usually acting out of a profit motive, which can shift with changing cultural tides. So when I read Mattel release a statement saying, "We are proud to highlight the importance of inclusion and acceptance at every age, and to recognize Laverne's significant impact on culture with a tribute collection Barbie," I immediately thought of Bud Light, who did a social media campaign with Dylan Mulvaney, a trans woman, and when it received backlash, they immediately dropped her and backpedaled.
For a company to hire a trans person and then not publicly stand by them is worse, in my opinion, than not hiring a trans person at all. What transpired from that video was more bullying and transphobia than I could have ever imagined.
So whenever I see a corporation being supportive of trans people, it's nice only in so much that it has the potential to have a real positive impact. But I don't really trust any corporate entity to be a trans ally. Corporations can't be trans allies because they're not people, they're brands, and they generally only represent the values of whatever brings them profits. Even Harry revealed that her casting in the Barbie film had nothing to do with trans representation. So while conservatives are hailing her presence in the Barbie film as an evil push by the elites to make everyone trans,
this movie is the slickest, most visually appealing, and therefore most insidious packaging of feminist cliches and trans grooming that you have ever seen.
the simple truth is that the casting director didn't even know that she was trans. But don't worry, because we can always tell. But Harry does also recognize a powerful message for trans gals within the Barbie mythos. She says, "I think as a trans girl it's easy to get caught up in big dreams of what you'll become. And it's inevitable that you'll get struck down by external messages and obstacles of what you'll never be and what you won't be able to do. You're caught constantly between striving for perfection and recoiling from rejection. It's hard." As much as there's a celebration of femininity and being a girl in the Barbie movie, I think there's also an encouragement of letting go of the checklist we ascribe to living and living your life and being in your body your way on your own terms. The best that we can do as women, as trans women, is be there for each other and take ourselves at face value without relying on the green light from someone or anyone else. I'm not here to celebrate Barbie as some perfect queer icon. For the most part, she was a figure of unachievable body standards for women, whiteness, wealth, and yes, despite the frequent queer and camp undertones, heteronormative values as well. Barbie is a cog in the capitalist machine, but her mythos has the power to be a positive space for celebration of camp and hyperfemininity, and that's pretty great. And whether through trans dog cats or Laverne Cox or Barbie Doctor, I'm glad Barbie has given a space for the dolls to doll, because dolling is important, and we all have the unalienable human right to doll to our plastic heart's content. And that's on period.
Hey everyone, I hope you're loving my vlog. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe so you can get the latest and greatest Barbie vlogs and more. Oh, and let me know what you want to see in the comments below. I'll be reading them, so you may just see what you ask for. Stay tuned. Peace.